Team with a Vision presents Tip of the Day. In this segment, Chaz Davis interviews Coach John Furey on diet, nutrition, and hydration. When it comes to the marathon, many runners consider the benefits of proper fueling before the race. This doesn't just start the day of the race, though. We learn how to consistently fuel and hydrate ourselves in the few days before the race so that you're not doing too much or too little in anticipation of running the impending 26.2.
Hydration, fueling, nutrition, the diet. So, leading up to the race, especially in the couple of days before the race, are pretty important for, how you feel on race day. And so if we're looking at the day before even, what would that day look like diet-wise, hydration-wise, to make sure that we'd be good for the next day? And, even on race morning, what kind of pre-race meal would go into, really feeling good on race day?
Okay, so I would say a couple of things, Chaz. First, especially with the weather we've been having and the potential weather we're going to have coming up to race day, hydration is even important now than it would be in the winter, simply because it's so much easier to be chronically dehydrated with the humidity and the weather we've been having. So regular hydration, even going into the week, is key. You don't want to be behind. And the last couple of days, years ago, you used to see a lot more focus on the carbo loading going 3 days out. Now it's more like the day out, because simply what the science showed is our cutback in training almost enhances that carbo loading type mechanism more. So, that day out, say, let's talk about, even if we're doing it on a Sunday, say we're going out Friday night, really good carbo-based meal with some good proteins in there, really good meals on Saturday, and making sure that your breakfast of race day, and I'm guessing most people are probably going to be going early to mid-morning, your breakfast is something that you've already experimented with and found to be successful in these long runs that you've been doing the last few months or beyond. So, it is highly individualized. There's people that can eat a huge breakfast and are ready to roll right away. And there's other people that need several hours. So I think that you almost want to adjust your own personal start time based on your gut tolerance, your digestive issues, things that make you the most comfortable. Like, don't feel that you have to set it at a 7A or an 8A start if you're that individual that has trouble with digestion and letting the gut feel good before you run and you need a little bit more time. So I think the planning in these weeks is critical to get everything in order when we head into that weekend, and give yourself some leeway and flexibility. Don't feel like you have to be that person that says, I'm going out at 8 o'clock. Now, the weather might be the curveball. If we decide that it's Saturday or Sunday of that weekend and the forecast is calling for 88 degrees by 11, it might change that a little bit, but you can adjust that individually based on gut tolerance. And there's just so many good food strategies that work well. And like I said, I'll be sending out probably from now till the weekly emails, and we'll be talking in great detail, and I'll give all sorts of sample diets and meals that will get you going. But you definitely want to make sure that you've tested it in these Saturdays.
Awesome. And then, during the actual race itself, staying hydrated, being able to take in fuel, electrolytes, gels, things like that. I think it really differs from person to person. Again, it's very individualized. But what do you think is kind of the safest bet when taking gels? Every how often would we be doing that, and how often should we be taking water, especially given the weather that we've been having throughout a lot of the country?
Sure. So great question. I think you're looking at water every mile to mile and a half, in that range, no more than a 2-mile gap there. So let's say we're talking 10 to 20 minutes with water, 30 to 40 minutes if you're using the gels. The beauty of what we have now is you have so many different substances that are gut tolerant. That's the big buzzword in sports nutrition, that everything you decide on should be based upon that. The gels and the goos were kind of the first guys on the block back in the late 90s and early 2000s, and they were the go-tos for a lot of people. But there was a good segment of the population that, it was a digestive issue. It didn't feel ideal. Now you have the noons and electrolyte tablets you can drop into your water. But I would say the key message is you can't just use water alone. You got to make sure you have your certain amount of electrolytes and nutritions. That's why the gels work good, or the Cliff Block, Sport Bean. So they're all pretty much similar in content. I think it comes down to how your gut feels, personal preference, and so forth. But generally, you're looking at drinking, say 3 times an hour, maybe 4, snacking 2, and hopefully that holds you through. The wild card is just the slosh and the jiggle effect of the gut when you run long. It just is, it's less than a perfect world with that. And sometimes you might have a plan that's really well thought out and tested in training, but you may run into a little trouble on that day. Some people just go old school with salt tablets. Salt sticks work really well. Also assess your sweat rate. If you're that person that's a really heavy, salty sweater, you might need to get a little bit more aggressive with your intake and monitor that on these days now. So that's what you need. The water, you do need the electrolytes. If you go straight Gatorade, then you don't need the gels as much. And there's not a lot of people that can do that. But if you just did your Gatorade or your sport drink, that way you're getting your electrolytes, your calories, and your fluid. So you're getting everything you need.
Yeah. And you said something big there too, is to be trying all that stuff out now. So on race day, we're really in good shape and we're not having to worry about having GI problems and things like that.
And there's still time. If you felt like you haven't nailed it down now, you still have, you go to a marathon or a Heartbreak Hill, or order some stuff at Amazon and get a couple of different products. I mean, people love the Cliff Blocks. They love the goos. Ton of people using the Noon or the electrolyte tablets that give you the electrolytes with the water. Then there's people that love the old school snacking of the pretzels and bagels or whatever. So there really is a lot of strategies. You just need some calories, you need some electrolytes and some fluids, and a nice mix of them.
Right. Yeah, definitely. And, during the race too, I think something that scares a lot of first-time marathoners is that proverbial 20-mile wall. And so I think, of course, there's the nutrition and you're taking in electrolytes, being hydrated, that goes into that. But then also pacing too is huge. So how would you approach pacing during the marathon and really being able to check with your body and see where you're at and make adjustments if needed?
That's probably the most important thing you can do. Bill Rogers once said that you run 3 perfect races in your life, and the marathon is the hardest of any race to be able to determine the pace that you're going to be able to sustain the whole way and nail it. So it's that difficult because there's so many factors. You have the biggest factor, Chaz, is probably the given day. How does your body respond on that day? So you might have training runs where you absolutely crush it and you say, hey, I'm good for a 7:30 pace. You have your nutrition down, the weather cooperates, but then sometimes on the days, things just don't work well. But I think you need to take a look at your training runs. How are you feeling on these runs? What's your pace? Can you run a nice block in the middle? Like, let's talk about the August 22nd run. Can you run 8 miles in the middle at race pace, 2 miles, maybe 30 or 40 seconds faster than race pace, and then feel good at mile 16 and then cool down for your last 4. So there's some different indicators that you could use. Unfortunately, we haven't had the ability to run any halves recently, so we don't have the time trial ability. But I think that if anything with pace, you play it more conservative. You go, if you're unsure, you play it conservative, go hold back a little bit, and then keep some money in the bank for later on. But it's the hardest thing to do in distance running, from the absolute novice to the elite, to be able to nail that pace right on the line and keep it going the whole time. So do your best based on your training, using that example I just said, looking back at maybe some of your races and kind of gauging your fitness based on what you've been doing during this period to say, hey, I might be a little bit fitter than the half I ran in February, March, and I'll adjust accordingly. Hard thing to do. It really is. And you can do everything right, and sometimes the finished product doesn't give you what you want and creates incredible frustration because you don't have a lot of shots at this. But do the best you can. Let me know if you need any help trying to figure that out as well.
Yeah, I definitely know that feeling. And so I think all of what you said right there is huge, and just really being able to look at your own training and know that what you're capable of as an individual really will reflect on race day. And so really considering that we're having a virtual race and it's not like the typical Boston Marathon with all the support out there, what advice do you have for people so that they can still have a good race, the race that they want? What would they have to do in order to, have water stops and things like that?
Okay.
What advice would you have there?
So I think there's a few things that work in your favor on this, Chaz. I think one, you aren't going to go out fast like you would at Boston. The adrenaline factor is going to be in check, or it's going to be easy to put in check. And if you think about that start at Hopkinton, right? It's so easy to just smoke the first mile and almost use that momentum of the first mile to carry you into 2 and 3. And all of a sudden you ran one of your fastest 5Ks in a part of a marathon, right? So I don't think that's going to be a factor. 2, choose a course that suits you well. If it was my call, flat, fast, shaded. Do everything, especially if you've really put good training in and you're saying, hey, I think I have the potential to run a good time. Or on the other side of it, if your training has been less than ideal, you want the flat, fast, shaded, if possible, course. 3, enlist as much support from family and friends as you have, ideally in the latter half, right? Even if it means, a family member that's hopping on a bike or someone that's running the last critical 6 or 8 miles with you at a pace, and someone who's positive and motivational. So I think these are the strategies that you want to start to put together. But I do see some of the silver linings of not going out that quick. And also a huge factor, if you drive the Boston Marathon a few days before the race, you'll see a light green or a light blue line. The BAA draws the tangents of the ideal way to run a race. Instead of following the winding road and the crowd, we've all seen watches after a marathon and you end up running 27.4 miles, right? I think if you have really nice straight shots, you're going to run less. So you have the chance. If you've done good training, you pick a good course, you have the support, you do the tape, you run smart to run a really good time, even though it's technically virtual. So I think those are the strategies that, I've never really been involved with a virtual race like this. So I've just been kind of thinking on what would I do? What would make good sense for me? And I would also look at the forecast like 7-10 days out and almost have that like plan B, where if it's, hey, I want to run Sunday, but Saturday's sunny and 77 and Sunday's 86, almost have that 24 to 48 hour adjustment if possible, if, just to make life easier. So those are some of the things I'd be starting to strategize about to make it, why not pick the fast course, right? So.
Yeah. I really think that there's so many big takeaways there, and I really appreciate all the advice that you've given. Do you have any last comments kind of leading up to the marathon?
I would say just enjoy the day as much as you can. We know it's not the race, but anyone who's really put the time in over the summer to grind through this, and it's been a tough summer, like I said, and I've said in a few emails, it's motivationally, and then you throw the heat in there and the length of the training cycle. So just try to do your best to make it as enjoyable as you can, and pull out the strategies to make it, if you feel like, hey, I would like to knock down the good time, like work that to your advantage, and have your friends and family around you to make it as enjoyable as possible.
Absolutely. Well, I really appreciate it, Coach. I thank you for joining us.
Anytime, Chaz. Good talking to you, buddy.
Yeah, good talking to you.
Okay.
Team with a Vision will be back soon with more tips leading up to race day.